Did Apple just get banned from leaving China? Yep, you heard that right. Apple, the $2.7 trillion tech giant, announced its shift away from Chinese manufacturing to move iPhone production to India. But the Chinese Communist Party said, not so fast. And this isn't just about Apple. This is the tip of the iceberg in what might be the fastest unraveling of a global economic giant in modern history. We are witnessing, in real time, the CCP panic as China's economy crashes, factories shut down, and foreign companies race for the exits. But here's the real question. Why is China trying to trap global businesses inside its borders? Why is it quietly removing tariffs on hundreds of US goods while publicly shouting about free trade being under threat? And why is Beijing acting like it can't survive without products it once mocked as obsolete? Stick around, because what we are about to uncover is a massive shift in global power, and it's not being talked about on mainstream news. This is a story of desperation, misinformation, collapsing economies, and the global reset that's already underway. Let's break it down. For the past 30 years, China has built its wealth by becoming the factory of the world. Cheap labor, massive infrastructure, and an endless line of Western businesses looking to cut costs. It was a win-win until it wasn't. Because now, the very companies that made China rich are trying to leave, and the Chinese government is doing everything it can to stop them. Take Apple, for example. One of the largest and most valuable companies in history, a company that practically defined globalization. Apple doesn't just sell in China, it builds there. For years, it relied on Chinese workers and Chinese factories to produce hundreds of millions of iPhones, MacBooks, AirPods, and more. But now, Apple is shifting that production to India. Why? Simple, geopolitical risk. The writing's on the wall. Tensions over Taiwan, sanctions, trade wars, and increasing unpredictability from the CCP have made China too risky for long-term investment. So Apple announced plans to shift production for the iPhone 17 and beyond to factories in India operated by Foxconn. But here's where it gets wild. The Chinese government stepped in and blocked it. Not openly, of course. That would be too obvious. Instead, they used bureaucracy and back channels. They delayed shipments of iPhone-making machinery. They rejected export applications. Chinese equipment suppliers were literally banned from sending key tools out of the country. One company had to disguise its shipment by setting up a fake front in Southeast Asia just to get the machinery into India. These aren't rumors. This is documented. Think about what that means. China isn't just upset that a company is leaving. It's trying to physically stop them. That's a level of control and panic we haven't seen before. And it's happening for a reason. Because once the supply chains leave, they don't come back. Foxconn's India plant. That's permanent. The moment Apple and other companies complete the shift, China loses leverage forever. And that's terrifying for the CCP. But wait, it gets deeper. While Beijing is blocking Apple's exports, behind the scenes they are rolling back tariffs on US goods, secretly. That's right. Despite all the anti-America propaganda, Chinese officials have quietly reduced tariffs on over 130 categories of US-made goods. That includes semiconductors, aviation parts, chemicals, and even some vaccines. The total value of goods potentially exempted. Over $46 billion, nearly one-third of all US exports to China. Let that sink in. Publicly, they are railing against the US in speeches at the UN. Privately, they are begging for more access to American products. Why? Because they can't survive without them. China's domestic semiconductor industry is a full decade behind the West. Even the lower-tier chips that the US doesn't brag about, China still can't make those at scale. And those chips are essential. They go into everything from smartphones and laptops to speakers, microwaves, and factory machinery. Same with aviation parts. Remember when XiJinping announced that China would stop buying Boeing planes? Well, here's the twist. While Chinese airlines were banned from purchasing new aircraft, the ones they already operate still need maintenance. Guess who supplies the parts for that? Yep, American companies. Without those parts, planes start falling from the sky. We are already seeing signs of this in Russia, where grounded flights and maintenance failures are becoming the norm. China knows it can't go down that path. So even though they won't admit it, Beijing is now begging for American technology, for US components, and for the same free trade system they claim is broken. And here's the irony of it all: while they are secretly opening the doors to American goods, they are closing the doors on their own companies trying to leave. So what's really going on? Why is China acting like a desperate ex trying to stop everyone from moving on? Because the economy is worse than they are admitting. The official GDP growth number for Q1 is 5.4%. Sounds good, right? But here's the problem: the real indicators don't match. Consumer prices are down. Producer prices have been negative for 30 straight months. Tax receipts have dropped. These aren't signs of growth. These are signs of a deflationary collapse. Factories are sitting on unsold inventory. Products that were meant for US consumers are now flooding the domestic market at fire sale prices. Huge export-oriented factories, once booming with foreign orders, are now desperate for cash. And guess who suffers most? The small domestic factories that weren't built for export. They can't compete with giant exporters selling products at a loss just to survive. They are shutting down, laying off workers. Entire regions of China are turning into ghost towns of economic activity. And it gets darker. Because XiJinping has spent years conditioning the Chinese people to believe that China has already surpassed the West. That the US is declining. That China doesn't need anyone. So how do you walk back that narrative when your entire economy is built on imported tech and foreign demand? You don't. You lie. You censor. You block Apple from leaving. You interfere in foreign democracies to control the narrative abroad. Take the Philippines, for example. Just last week, Chinese embassies were caught hiring local trolls to spread fake news and push pro-China sentiment online. They used a PR firm, Infinitus, to run a disinformation campaign targeting Filipino President Marcos Jr. while boosting pro-Beijing politicians. And this isn't new. The CCP has used this tactic in the US, Australia, Canada, and beyond. But here's the good news: countries are waking up. They are fighting back. South Korea just imposed a 38% anti-dumping tariff on Chinese steel. Why? Because China was flooding their markets with underpriced metal to keep its factories running. Brazil is now ramping up iPhone production at Foxconn facilities as a low-tariff alternative to China. India has imposed new tariffs on Chinese steel as well, blocking the CCP from dumping excess inventory abroad. And perhaps the biggest sign of change: the US Treasury just announced that over 100 countries have reached out for trade negotiations. Countries don't want to be dependent on China anymore. The US doesn't want to be dependent. Companies like Apple don't want to be dependent. The era of China being the world's workshop is ending, and the CCP knows it. What's coming next isn't just a realignment of supply chains. It's a global economic reset. And it's not going to be easy. Companies are addicted to cheap production. Moving factories costs money. It takes time. And it's risky. But there's now a powerful incentive to diversify. The risk of putting all your eggs in the China basket is just too great. Xi Jinping could call up every American company and say, leave now or lose everything. He could nationalize factories, seize intellectual property, shut down exports. And suddenly, the global economy goes dark. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a real risk that smart companies are finally preparing for. Some policy experts are even floating ideas like dynamic tariffs, a new kind of system where the US would impose escalating tariffs on any country we import more than, say, $100 billion from. That way, we force companies to spread their operations across many countries instead of centralizing everything in one. We don't want low-value, labor-intensive jobs here. We want high-value manufacturing. Chips, aerospace, green tech. The rest. Let it be split between friendly nations who don't pose a strategic threat. So what happens now? Will China continue tightening its grip on foreign companies, even as its economy crumbles? Will more countries follow South Korea and India in blocking China's dumping tactics? Will Apple be able to fully exit, or will the CCP retaliate in a way that changes everything? The clock is ticking. Question of the day: should Western companies be banned from putting critical supply chains in countries like China? Is that a free market betrayal, or just common sense in 2025? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay informed. Stay sharp. And I'll see you in the next one.